Hi, welcome to the fourth part of the Cellular Automata series in Touch Designer. In this video, we're going to see how to create a 3D scene from the data from the game of life. Bear in mind though that this is still a two-dimensional system, we're just going to represent it in a higher dimension. For a true 3D system of a cellular automata, I will make later on another video. Okay, let's begin by creating a renderer here. So I'm going to create simply a container where I'm going to create all my scene, and let's call this renderer. So our goal is to generate something that looks like this. So as you can see is the grid, we have some shadows, we have a kind of an enclosure here, and some backgrounds. So we're aiming for this. What I'm gonna do is nothing really special. Probably you're very proficient with it. It's just some instancing and some modeling. So this part is more for fun, just so you can get the final result that I showed just now. So I will go rather quickly over it because it's something most of us you already know. Okay, let's go inside. Let's create an in and let's create an out. Here is our data. Gonna pass. Now for my 3D scene, I want to see this comfortably, so I'm just gonna create an arcbolt camera. I'm gonna steal it from the tools. Here we go. And this camera is gonna be looking at the parent comp indeed. I'm gonna rename my out to be BG, and here I'm gonna look at that BG texture, so it shows here. I also need to enable in the panel the middle right and the center, so the middle wheel, so I can control the camera from here. And let's just change the size of this to be a proper resolution. And finally, let's make this viewer floating around so we can see the progress while we create our network. Okay, that should be enough. Now let's jump into this. Okay, so the first thing to do is we need to create a grid. So transform this into a 3D representation using a grid. What better for that than a grid? Nice. Now the grid has to be the same dimensions as our texture is. So let's create here a null and reference this texture. Let's call it goal game of life. And for the rows, we need the width of that texture. So that would be that. And for the height, we need the, for the columns, we need the height. Okay. Then what I need to do is to pass this information so that some instances, they can make use of it. There's various ways we could do this, but I'm going to use it. I'm going to do it with chops because I want to add data comfortably to this. So let's just do that and create a null here, and we're going to call this data. All right. Next thing is we need something to instance. And of course, we want the cells to be represented with some depth. So let's just use boxes. I use a box. And before we proceed, we need to think how big these boxes should be. So they should be relative to the size of my grid. The grid is 64 by 64, so one box would be 1 over 64. So let's scale it so that it matches that dimension. I'm gonna say 1 over the dimension of my game of life. I'm gonna take the width because we're assuming that we're working always with square dimensions, so square and height will match. Width and height will match. So I just take the width for now. That will work in our case. So that's the size of our box, and now we simply need to instance this. Let's create here a geometry and instance this geometry with the data that we have. So we're going to move this in the tx, ty, and tc axes, and we should see our grid here. And you see all the cells are fine there. Now let's render this so we can see it comfortably on our little window here. Let's add a renderer. Let's pass this renderer to the to the output here. Okay, and let's create some light so we can see something. And there we go. That's our grid. Now, another thing I want to do is I want to color the boxes according to their live state. So let's make here some space. Let's move this a little bit to the back here. And now let's grab all the colors so I can plug that into my data as well. So I'm going to convert this into a chop. And what I need to grab from here is just one of the channels, because if you can tell, all the channels have the same information, RGB. So I just need to have the R. And this needs to be, of course, the full image. And in order for this to work, I need to sequence the channels. I'm going to shuffle this. So make just one big list so I can pass it to my data. And I'm going to shuffle it by sequencing. Then we have this. Nice. And what I want to do is to rename this to be the alive states to keep consistency with what we have been calling things so far. Let's put here a merge. And let's plug this into our data. All right, perfect. Now you can simply pass in the instance2 page the alive state for RGB, and I should see my cells coloring. Great, that looks good. Now this doesn't seem to be very 3D to me, besides the grid itself, so let's try to place the cells that are alive a little bit higher than those that are dead. So exactly, let's put it one box higher, so the unit. For that, we need to maybe create here another branch. This is going to be called the depth. And this branch has to be scaled according to the size of a box. So let's use a math. And this math will go here. And the size of this has to be, of course, what we already calculated. So the unit size for each cell. So let's just grab this value here and plug it into our multiply. Great. And now let's pass for the depth of the instances this value here, so depth. Okay, so I saw there is some displacement going on. Cannot really see it very well. So just for checking what's going on, let's put here a fung with some ambient light. We don't even need the fung. So you can see now here how they are moved up relative to the other ones. All right, that's nice. Now let's see what else. What we need to do now is, of course, to make this thing pretty, because we had all sorts of shadows. We had an edge, like an enclosure for a grid. So let's do that. First thing is to create the enclosure box. So if you remember from the image we're trying to recreate, we had this black thing. That's what I mean, this enclosure box. And let's do that first. So what better than another box? And now this box has to be slightly bigger than my grid. And well, let's just place it to see how we can model this and create a geometry. Bam. Okay, so this is clearly not good for us. We need to scale it down. So let's first of all make the size to be 0.1 or something like that. So it is better placed there. Now let's displace this a little bit down so that the box or the enclosure is under or in the back of the grid. So let's translate on the z-axis maybe 0.5 or something like this. Great. So now that looks better. This is on the back, but I also want that the edges are the enclosure. So for the X and Y, let's just tiny bit bigger. Okay, that's it. So now we have a proper looking enclosure. Wonderful. And we also need to have some some backgrounds, because in my example here we had this background. And let's do it in a very simple way. I'm just gonna use a rectangle here, and this rectangle we're gonna make it big. So let's just do 5 by 5 rectangle, and let's create here a geometry, and that's it. So now I have, you cannot really see because they have different well, have the same color. So there's my enclosure, there's the background, and there's the grid with the cells. So now we have all the elements. We're done with the modeling part of it. We just need now to do the materials and the lighting. So let's start with the materials. And what I want to do is, let's use some PVR materials. So we don't need the ambient light. We need an environment light. Let's throw an environment light here. For the environment light, I'm going to use the following texture. So I'm going to use this texture. So this is an high dynamic range image that I took from the internet. It's a free one. I will attach it to you to the project so you can use it as well, or you can try with other ones. So this is going to be my environment map. And then we need to start putting some materials to these things. Let's begin with the edge, with the enclosure we made. So here we're going to create a PBR. This is going to be my enclosure. And for the enclosure, I will use, very lazily, I will use the substance. And it's just the basic substance that comes with Touch Designer. So let's put these things, let's put it here. Okay. And let's change the edge a little bit. Let's make this, for example, more black, I guess. I think that was the case, yeah. So it was black. You see we have inverted colors. So better yet, let's begin by doing the cells, the dead cells white and the white cells black. So, and then let's move to the cells here and create also a PBR material for them. Put it into here. And now let's think about the colors. How do we want to do that? So they should be inverted. And in order to invert them, we can do something very simple, which is to just grab the color. Here is the color. Is this? Yeah, this is the alive we're using for color. So just gonna put a matte here and invert it. So like this. Yep. Okay, so now the higher ones are black and the bottom ones should be white. And they're not white because my PBR is way too dark. So let's just make this PBR non-metallic. And let's, yeah, the base color, let's pump that up to be white. There we go. Nice. Okay, now we're gonna do the sides. So the enclosure, this box thing, and we see here that this complains, and this is complaining because PBR requires, of course, the attributes called tangent. So we need to calculate tangents. And let's just do here attribute create compute tangents. And also for this guy, because we're going to be using PBR all over the place. Let's compute tangent, and here as well. And that warning should be now gone. All right. Now for the color of this one, this needs to be black. So let's make it black. 0, 0, 0. And let's create the roughness. Let's make it a little bit, let's rough. And we see something interesting going on with the render here. And that has to be do with the priority probably. And so let's, or maybe let's just put this a little bit there. Okay. That looks nice. So maybe the roughness, we leave it at 0.3 or 0.35 or something like that. And that should be enough. Okay, now let's do the background as well. For the background, we need to have something, and I see that the background you see is placed at the same level of the box, so we need to also displace that a bit, so it's more on the back. Let's move this for in the depth for minus with minus 0.1. Okay, that's better. And for the color of that one, let's also use a PBR. Let's just use again this PBR here, and let's use the substance very lazily for now. You can do at home a much more fancy render if you want. And then just this. And for the color, let's also pump up the thing a little bit. All right, like this. Nice. So this is already closer to the image we wanted to create. Now we're missing a couple things. We're missing, first of all, some shadows. And the lighting seems to be a bit different. So let's just do something close to that. All right. Let's begin with the lightning because we need some shadows indeed. So to do that, let's create a null. This null, let's put our lights up here. My lights are gonna be looking at the null. I'm gonna have two lights. Okay, that's a bit more bright. And the lights need to be looking at the null so I can comfortably create shadows. So let's put that in the look at parameters. And let's place these lights in space. So I'm just gonna place them with some values I already know work for this scene. So that will be here 3 on the y-axis and 5 on the z-axis. And for the other light, I will do -2, 3, and 3. Okay, now the scene is way too bright. We need to decrease a little bit the values for the light. So let's change one of them to be softer. So let's do here 0.5. All right. And now we just need to cast some shadows. So let's enable shadows for both of them. We're still at 60 frames. It's not so computationally expensive, so we can do some shadows for both lights. Yes, that looks nice. All right, looking good. And we see one thing with the shadow, and that is that it's a little bit, you see it's a little bit, I don't know what the word for that in English is, rugged, or it's a little bit dented. So let's increase the softness, the maximum softness of this light to be a bit high. Also for this one. Okay, that helped. Good, I like it. Now, another thing we can do is if you see these guys, it's hard to tell which the separation of them. So we cannot tell in these two easily that they're two different things. So let's make the dimension, so the scale of the elements, a tiny little bit smaller so that we can do that. So there are a couple ways we could do it, but let me say, let's do it like this. We're gonna customize our scene. I'm gonna call this controls, a new page, and we're gonna do a scale parameter for it. And in the scale, we're gonna do a slightly smaller size for the cubes. And we can do it here right away. So let's just say the scale is that times the parameter. Parent scale. Once we do that, now it's very easily seen that we have different objects here and looks much better in my opinion. And that is pretty close to what we wanted. Maybe one last thing that we could do is to, because this looks a little bit aliased or something, so we can fix this a tiny bit. You can do way more if you want on your own, but for this example I'm just going to do quickly a blur here, a little bit of blurring, and a level to see if we can correct some color here. And the blur, let's do tiny little bit, maybe 3 or something. Yeah, that's nice. All right. And for the level, you can play a little bit with this, maybe with the colors. Yeah, well, that's not really something we want to do now. Okay. This is the example that you see online. And the last thing we need to do now is to run our thing. So let's just do that. Let's go here, show the parameters, show the scene. Ah, that looks not so good. That is because probably I didn't pass here the resolution. I should pass the resolution that I created here. So let's do here .w and h. Yeah, that looks much better. A bit smaller so we can see things. And now let's play with this. Let's just reset it. We see our banana, and now they are taking some life. All right. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial so far. Stay tuned for the next one where we will do a true three-dimensional system. See you later.